and welcome to Monday Morning Glory. My name is Jasmine McGlure.
And I'm Mary Miller.
And we are both life coaches who have experienced sudden devastating loss, and we have made it our passionate goal to try to be a resource and a hope and a space of healing for others who might be dealing with loss and different aspects of loss, whether you're dealing with the loss of life and a loved one, or you're dealing with some sort of major disappointment in your life. We hope to just, like I said, bring a resource to you. So today we have joining us our guest from CSP Financial Group, Kai Jacobs. Kai, welcome to the Monday Morning Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you all for having me.
Yes, he's joining us all the way from Arizona, where he said that the humidity and the heat is unpleasurable today.
Which I'm surprised because I didn't think Arizona had much for humidity.
No, we don't got no humidity. It's a nice dry heat out here, but
okay.
Yeah, it's a toaster for sure.
Yeah. So he's going to be joining us to talk about the grief that comes with finances. And there's so many different ways I could ask these questions. And I think I'm sure you probably have a lot of different ways you can answer it as well. But the first question I want to ask you is, how have you seen finances cause grief? And I'm sure probably anybody who has a heartbeat has experienced some grief related to their finances. How have you seen that affect some of the clients that come to you?
Yeah.
What does that look like for them?
I think that's a really great question because I do see a lot of that, and I think a few examples really come to mind from that standpoint. What I see a lot, and a recent situation I've seen come to happen, is where I had a couple recently, and the wife was really engaged, like really excited about planning, going through all the steps, really working on creating a financial plan, a budget for herself, that kind of stuff. And then the husband was really disengaged from the process, not super into it. And then, we find that the husband has a lot of credit card debt, right? And then we put together a plan, hey, let's go about, paying off the credit card debt by doing this, and, let's execute XYZ steps. And then, a little bit of radio silence is kind of what we get on the other end, right? And then, 3 months, 6 months go by, and we're checking in with the wife. The husband's not really joining those calls. And at a certain point, she's like, you know what, just create a scenario with just me, and let's just look at me from a retirement standpoint. And you can tell, it's kind of getting to that point where she's like, I don't even know what he's going to do in retirement, but I know how I'm going to get through retirement, and that's what concerns me, because the wife, she wants to retire early. She's not interested in, being burdened by this credit card debt that really isn't her responsibility. But, that's just a situation where I see where, a couple starts to kind of butt heads really in that world of finance and money. And that's a really key example that kind of comes to mind most recently. There's definitely a few more I could list off if we want to get into them too.
Yeah, I think that's a great kickoff, because that's not just what that I think reveals is like other grievances that are tied to finances. It's usually not just one thing. It could be the grief connected to maybe the communication in marriage. Right. So, or job loss, maybe he's grieving. It's a heavy thing for him to have to face it. Maybe he's having to face something in himself. So, I mean, that really kind of gets into the weeds. What came to your mind, Mary? What were you thinking?
Well, my question, kind of like what you were saying, from what I know, money usually represents something to everybody. And it's usually some type of a heart issue. It can be a wounded issue. But I was going to ask Kai, in your estimation of all the clients that you've seen, what do you see as being one of the reasons that people avoid even making a plan?
That's a really good question. I've actually heard, a lot of different reasons from a lot of different folks over the last few years I've been doing this. And I think one of the things I most often see is uncertainty. When somebody's feeling uncertain or some sense of fear around the future, a lot of times when we get in our heads and we have this idea of what we think the future is going to look like, and we think there's not a way to really change that, or dealing with, uncertainty and what's going on in our day-to-day lives, a lot of times, when folks get caught up in that uncertainty or that lack of vision for the future, they don't really tend to want to follow through with a financial plan or things like that, because that's something that really is, both now and future based, right? That's something I see a lot.
And I think it's ironic, though, that it's the fear of the uncertainty, but they don't realize that by actually making a financial plan actually brings security, and it can calm that fear. But a lot of it, but I think there's sometimes probably shame involved in people. Well, where does the money going? I don't know. So to actually sit down and actually look at where am I spending my money, I might have to deal with it. So I think there can be some shame and some control thing, going on there.
Absolutely.
Jasmine, you're on mute. You're still muted.
There we go. It would help if you can hear me. I mute myself because I don't want to catch any of the reverberations or whatever like that, any of the reverb. But anyway, what do you all do if you see some of those emotional stuck places with your clients? Do you tend to move into some form of coaching them with that, or do you guys kind of back away and just wait until they're ready? Like, what is your approach when you see someone that has that fear of the uncertainty and tends to back away because of that?
It definitely depends. I would say it's kind of a case by case basis from that standpoint. And I think it just depends as to how open folks are from that standpoint. There's a lot of conversations I have, where we're just listening and just kind of hearing what's going on in our clients' lives and just kind of where they're at and the things they're dealing with, and trying to find solutions to both just be there for them as a general human person, but also helping them with the financial element. But there's definitely times too where sometimes folks aren't really looking for that kind of coaching or feedback, or they don't really want to dive that deep into what's going on in their day-to-day lives. And I won't push people past what's comfortable for them, for sure, from that standpoint.
Yeah. Oh, and now Mary's muted.
Am I muted?
Now you're good.
Okay. I like this with the example that you shared, because this is one of the things that I think you would probably run into when you have a couple where one is on board and one isn't. The one who's on board can feel almost handcuffed, that, okay, I'm stuck. I can't do anything because they're not willing to do anything. I like the example that you gave, that she came to herself, okay, then let's just focus on me. And I applaud that. And that's great, because because you can feel stuck because your partner isn't willing. And so it's a matter of figuring out, okay, then what can I do? So I really like that. I give her kudos for, stepping up and saying, okay, I'm not going to let, my husband doesn't want to do anything, I'm going to do something, at least to cover me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's encouraging to know that you can do that there's a way to do that for any couples that feel hindered, because of their spouse's financial choices, that they can still find some help for themselves. I can imagine it might be a little bit difficult for you to navigate because money is usually done together. So it seems like that might be a little challenging.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, I'm a big believer in, money being a team effort, just like you mentioned. So from that standpoint, where you've kind of got only one person playing the field, it does make it a little bit tougher, but sometimes that's just how it is. Sometimes, unfortunately, the spouse or partner or whatever that situation is, they're not that engaged in it. Or I'll see, where we have someone that's a pre-existing client, they get married, and then that new partner that's entered their life doesn't really want to engage in the same way either. Very similar situation, but from a different standpoint. And it's definitely something I see quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary.
Well, based on what we're talking about, Kai, I'm sure you have experienced people coming to you looking for help after a loved one, maybe their spouse has passed away, and they had nothing in place. And so I'm sure, and like I said, we did have a lot of stuff. My husband died very suddenly, so it wasn't like we planned for it, but we thought we had everything, But you discover there's still little things that I found out things that I did not know. So if you were able to and share with somebody, and what I try to emphasize with people, don't wait until your brain is offline in grief to have to deal with this stuff. So what would be some of the things that are, that you would suggest to people to make sure that they really have in place? Nobody likes to talk about the funeral planning, and nobody wants to talk about that. I get that. But you don't want to do it when your mind is offline too,
Yeah.
So what are some of the financial pieces that you would really encourage people to really start looking into and having in place before the inevitable?
Yeah. I think there's three things that really jump to my mind from that standpoint. And the first thing, I'd be looking at is, do we have some sort of estate plan in place, right? And that really constitutes a will and power of attorneys, which is, pretty critical just for the last wishes and making medical or financial decisions on the behalf of your loved one. And then also having a trust, if that made sense. If you've got assets where you don't want to go through a probate process upon the passing of a loved one or something along that line, so you can just immediately, change over and inherit as the beneficiary. That's something I see that makes it a lot cleaner. Even recently, I dealt with somebody who was the beneficiary of an estate, and they had no idea that they were the beneficiary, and they just lost their friend. So on top of that, having going through this grief, but then also suddenly inheriting this lump sum of cash that they had no idea, no expectation they were going to inherit, can be something that's kind of jarring emotionally. So I encourage from that standpoint too, people to have those kind of conversations when they've got those estate plans in place, because I think it makes that part a lot easier and making sure everything's titled properly, right? And a couple other pieces that would jump to my mind. I think something that's looked at less often is the tax element. So when you get into, gifting or, God forbid someone were to pass away, and how those assets are then passed in that next stage where they're going to somebody, and maybe suddenly now we've got something I see a lot is a huge tax implication for the beneficiary, where now suddenly they're sitting there looking at a 20, 30, 40, sometimes $100,000, $200,000 tax bill, depending on the size of the estate, that comes out of complete left field, right? And they don't have a CPA. They're not set up for that kind of stuff a lot of times. And that's something I see quite often from that standpoint. And the last thing I would say is, having some sort of life insurance can often also be very helpful. I know quite a few clients going through that grief process where having that life insurance from their spouse help them stay afloat and sometimes even retire early from that standpoint. So those would be the three things that really jump to my mind from that standpoint.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is, when would it be advantageous to have a trust versus just a will? And secondly, how do you help? What kinds of things can you have in place to help with the tax implications?
Yeah. No, I think those are great questions. From the will and trust standpoint, it really just depends on the assets that one had, I would say. So, if you've got a really simple situation where a lot of your money is in a qualified status, or all your beneficiaries are grown adults, something you don't have to deal with there, or it's like a very simple, you want to gift it all to one particular person. There's a lot of really more simple situations where you can most likely get away with just doing a will and power of attorneys, and you may still need to go through probate on some of those assets, right? And obviously, a trust is something that obviously keeps you out of that probate process and makes that whole process private versus it all being public information, which is what happens with probate.
This is something I dealt with, so I'm just curious. My husband, because he had a corporation, Are you here? Because we had a corporation, even though we had a will and everything, if I had my lawyer basically said, but you still have to go through probate because it was incorporated. So even if I had a trust, I still would have had to do the probate.
In business structure, that's something that's honestly a little bit outside of the realm of what I've dealt with personally. So I wouldn't be quite as confident to answer that question.
Okay, I just was curious. He said because there were shares in the corporation, you automatically had to do probate. So that's the way I understood it. So a trust probably wouldn't have made a difference. So
yeah.
And then the tax, how can you? What are some things you can have in place to protect your beneficiaries from the tax implications?
Implications, yeah. I mean, from that standpoint, it's all about structuring, I would say, how you've got your account set up, whether that's in like a qualified asset, say like a Roth or a traditional IRA or 401k, or in a non-qualified kind of tax bucket. There's a lot of different tax implication, on the non-qualified side, you've got more just capital gains type of tax versus on a qualified side, you've either got the tax on the gain plus, whatever it is taking it out, because those have all been deferred taxes. So I think having a strategy in place where you're able to, there's a lot of rules around gifting while you're still alive can be something that's really powerful to help, avoid having such a tax situation upon your passing. I see that sometimes where parents will go and, as they're getting a little bit later in their years, they've got plenty of assets to survive off. They want to leave something for their children. I've seen where, like a recent example is a dad went and is basically paying the daughter out of his assets, and then the daughter's using her entire salary to max out her 401k. Now she's building, big pre-tax tax deferral. The dad's using a gifting strategy to help avoid some of the tax implication while he's still living, and they're both benefiting a lot more strongly because of that.
What's the limit on the gifting?
On the gifting, I know it just changed with the big beautiful bill that passed. It was supposed to sunset this year on the previous tax bill coming into this next year. It was going to be 12 million. It was going to sunset to 6 million. I believe it's been refreshed. I don't know if it's all the way back up to 12 million, but I know it's been extended to be quite a bit higher.
So if you had that money, you could gift your child up to $6 million without them having to pay tax on it?
There's a little bit more to that for sure. I mean, it does come back to, how are those accounts structured? How is that money being passed? So there's definitely a little bit more from that standpoint. Like if it's in a pre-taxable bucket and you're gifting from that, there's still a tax being paid. But it can help mitigate that estate tax that comes, after your passing and things of that nature for sure.
Okay.
Excellent questions, Mary. These are like really involved. She's firing them off, Kai.
That's great.
Like I said, I learned a lot the hard way.
I hear that, yeah.
I learned, one of the things that I've told everybody, I did not know this, but when we set up our kids' accounts when they were 12, 13, I had my name on my daughter's account and my husband had his name on my son's account. Totally forgot about that. And when he passed away, half of what was in my son's account, he had to pay inheritance tax on because my husband's name was on the account. And it was like, oh, okay. So I'm telling everybody, once your kids turn 18, get your name off their account. Now, I did not realize also that you can put a beneficiary on your checking account and your savings account. I didn't know any of that either. So I've learned a lot of stuff the hard way.
Yeah. And I think, Kai, this would be some great, like those little nuanced tips to share even at the conference for, like when you say you don't know these things until it happens and you're like, because we're just told very blanket statements like make sure you get a beneficiary, but nobody really teaches us 12 years of education. And nobody tells us how our system works in this country, which is ridiculous. Um, but I do want to, and anybody who's listening, CSP does have online courses. Kai, could you expound a little bit about when those are, what they're about, and like the duration of them?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do a few different online classes. The primary one of which being the Financial Foundations course. That's a 8-week program that we do. It's 2 hours a week over the course of 8 weeks. It's about 16 hours total, and that really takes people through, I feel like, a good, solid foundation in the world of finance. We dive into a lot of different areas from, estate planning and life insurance, as I spoke about, to investment planning, tax planning, mortgages, a lot of those really big, critical, heavy pieces when it comes to your financial life. And our next one's going to be starting here towards the beginning of September as well. We usually do about 3 of those a year. We typically tend to skip around that holiday season because it's just a little bit too hectic for most folks. But yeah, we start those. All the details on that are on our website as well at cspfg.com. And yeah, they're really great courses for sure. All done live over Zoom.
We went through the first one. I'll go through it again. It is jam packed with information that I feel like should be taught in the public education. We're told to go get jobs. We're not told how to set ourselves up for wealth, or, I mean, that's a whole, I can get on a soapbox about that. But I would encourage anyone who is suffering from the grief, with dealing with grief in their finances, some of it is just a matter of education. Some of it, part of the battle is knowing it. And then the other part of it is going to be doing something about it. But I also wanted to address this other part that I don't know if it's talked about, but anyway, it's the part that when you are grieving and you have the brain fog. I had a client that would forget to pay her bills, because she suffered 2 losses within a short period of time. And just, oh, I forgot my rent was due. And then her job, she was suffering maybe like from job loss at the same time. So being able to pull herself together enough to function to pay bills, that can also be the grief that comes with finances is, I'm grieving and I'm forgetting, or I'm not even functional enough to remember to handle my responsibilities. So anybody just wants to kind of get back on their feet with their finances, I'm going to encourage you to reach out to Kai. I'll have him provide his information here at the very end. But also I wanted to include in that is sometimes I might be forgetting to pay my bills, but I also might be overspending. Because I'm grieving and I'm looking for something to help me cope. I'm looking for something that makes me feel good. And me and Hobby Lobby had a very strong relationship in the beginning. I would tell my husband, I'm having a hard day. He said, go to Hobby Lobby and just, whatever you find there. So I think when you're, whether it's that grief that comes from loss or grief that from whatever it might be, sometimes we're spending money emotionally to help us deal and cope with some other pain in our life. And if we don't find a good, healthy coping strategy for ourselves, we could be digging ourselves into a deeper hole through our spending. So, but yeah, so now might be a good time, Kai, if you want to tell people how to get in touch with you. And if they want to register for those classes, repeat your website and just your email and phone number.
Yeah, no, of course. And yeah, it's going to be myself is Kai Jacobs, and my email is just my first and last name, Kai Jacobs at cspfgllc.com. Our website is cspfg.com. We got information on there. There's a little link under the resources tab to our Financial Foundations course if that's something that interests anybody. It's a free 8-week program, and it's a lot of great information without a doubt. And feel free, anybody that wants to reach out, feel free to reach out. And it's absolutely been a treat to be on with the both of you. I do really appreciate it, Mary and Jasmine, for having me on here today with you both.
Well, we're honored to have you, Kai.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for taking your time, taking time out to be with us and to share some really good solid nuggets. I know that what you all do is it's been a blessing to me and my family for us getting ourselves on track, and we really needed the help that you guys offered. So thank you guys so much for always being available for us. And I highly recommend. Kai is a sweetheart. Me and Lori always talk about you too, about how awesome you guys are. So really appreciate that. Mary, any final thoughts before we close?
I'm just saying, Kai, I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person in November. And I think this is a plug here for the Morning Glory Conference we're doing in November. Kai will be there in person. So if you have any questions for him, come, and you can have his ear. You can get some questions answered. He will probably have materials for you, and he will be sharing a lot of good information. So, that's a great time to come and get some impersonal questions answered. So, and looking forward to that in November, Kai.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, awesome. And if you guys want to register for that conference, you can go directly to my website at jasminemcglure.com. So my first and last name.com. And the event is right there. You can just hit the registration button. And if you want to get in touch with Mary, share, Mary, how we can get in touch with you.
Get in touch with me at my empoweredlivinglc at gmail.com, or my website is empoweredlivinglifecoaching.net.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Kai, for joining us again. And until next time, we just appreciate you guys listening, and go register for that conference.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.